Hi, we are here tonight with Brad Barron. Brad is the Libertarian nominee for US Senate. He's challenging Mitch McConnell. And Brad and I are both really big on the fact that we are a party of ideas and we are a party of solutions, and we absolutely want you to tune in and listen to all of this. That said, I know some people are here just because they really hate Mitch. So if you just really hate Mitch and that's the only reason you're here, you go to the URL I have there, go ahead and donate to Brad. We get Brad $100,000. We're going to get him on stage. I figure we'll be costing Mitch $1 million at least. So if you hate Mitch, and I'm not advocating hate, we really need to work together and come up with good ideas. Hope you stick around for those. But if you're just on board with hate Mitch anyway, go donate money to Brad Barron. We got till about June 30th to raise $100,000. So chip in, help out. Thanks. All right. Brad, I know you're excited to talk about the big stuff, but even before that, I have another thing I noticed just because Kyle's a big fan of yours, Kyle O'Donnell, you know him.
That was great.
Yeah. And, you know, he commented there and it just hit me. It's like Kyle's really big into EVs, electric vehicles. And I'm somewhat into EVs. I drive an EV. And then I've talked to you before about the fact I'm reforesting about 130 acres. And the day I met you, I learned you were into regenerative farming.
Yeah.
And I think that's something. I mean, if you hear us talk policy, you hardly ever hear it. But if you come out and get to know libertarians, you learn libertarians are really avid about environmentalism. It's
Absolutely.
just, we do it really aggressively on a personal level.
Yeah. And
so
I think it's something that can bridge the gap as well with all the parties. It's something we can all agree on.
Right. But I was wondering, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on it because I know that's not why people are here, but could you tell us a little about regenerative farming? What exactly is regenerative farming?
Yeah, it's regenerative farming uses methods to build topsoil, to stop erosion. A lot of it, you don't use chemical applications. It's very efficient and very intriguing. Ties right into a lot of environmental policy all the way around. Clean water, clean air. Like when AOC was talking about cattle flatulence with the Green New Deal. One of the articles written in Regenerative Farmers was regenerative farming was, it's not the cow, it's the how.
Okay.
So, yeah, and it talked about how rotational grazing methods trumped, all these cattle going to the feed yards. Think about the resources that goes into that, which is something, like with Massey's Prime Act we're talking about right now.
Absolutely.
Securing a safe food source for the nation. When you have these slaughterhouses as conglomerates that are controlling the market, one of them goes down, you have huge supply chain issues.
Exactly.
And with regenerative farming, it rings synonymously right with the core of libertarianism, which is planting locally instead of centrally.
Exactly.
We want a robust local meat supply, local food source, and having these slaughterhouses nearby with the pandemic like we're having now sure does make them for a more stable food chain than what we've got now.
Yeah, I grew up with a steak in the freezer that came from my neighbor's cattle. And, in modern times, I don't even know if that's legal. I mean, you at least have to go through a couple of loops, like we would have to have technically owned the cow before. And
well, it's really pretty simple on that. What it is, let's say I have a beef cow for sale that's getting ready to go to slaughter.
Right.
I just take it there, have them cut it up, sell you some hamburgers, some pork chop, or some steaks, or if it's a hog that I'm having butchered, can't sell you pork chops or bacon. You would have to buy the cow or a percentage of that cow from me, then I could take it to the slaughterhouse and maybe you pay me a fee for moving it in my trailer or a haul bill. And then there would be a slaughter fee on top of it. So, it's really pretty inefficient as far as,
it'd be a lot
you
nicer
have
if
to
you
get
could
people
just
together, and a lot of people don't want that much meat at one time.
Sure.
So that's why deregulation on that would be great, to where more mom and pop slaughterhouses or on the farm could be done.
And mom and pop stores as well.
Absolutely.
Like in rural areas, I've got a couple of small stores near me. My parents owned a small country grocery store when I was in high school, and everybody loves local stuff. And the idea of, hey, do you have, I don't know what you brand your beef as, but do you have Barron beef or
Brad's beef?
Brad's beef. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody loves that. I love that. I mean,
they do.
I automatically, nothing against, I'm not even going to say a brand name. Just imagine a brand name.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather buy my meat from Brad.
Yeah, absolutely. And people would, if you can give it to them, knowing that it's been raised in an environmentally friendly way, that puts the icing on the cake.
Right.
Regulations. I mean, it's going. I mean, that's going to be probably a lot of the theme throughout this conversation that we have tonight. Is here's another place that made us less nimble.
Exactly.
During the pandemic, is the fact that through crony capitalism, you're allowing a few businesses to control such a major portion of the food supply.
Right.
And if that breaks down, horrible things can happen. I mean, you'd have to be living under a rock to not have seen an article talking about a meat shortage in the last week.
Right. Well, we've slipped into the main topic, and I mean that's something right there is. And I was saying this, I think it was Jacob Clark just a night or two ago. We were talking about change itself is painful. I mean, you hear the global warming activists talking about how many people are displaced. What that's really a function of is change. But a lot of the pain from the pandemic is pain from change. And a lot of it's going to be pain again when we change back. And what you were just talking about, when you decentralize and people are allowed to react locally and instantly to what they see on the ground before information bubbles up to whoever's on high, who gathers and makes the on high decision and then figures out the policy and propagates it back. We can cut out all that. We can cut all that. I can just go, Tyson's in trouble. I'm buying from Brad. It's that easy. It's that easy. And it makes us more nimble. And it makes the change less painful. The key to being able to manage change is being nimble. So if you want to be more secure and you want to be less susceptible to disruption, you want to be small and nimble.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm gonna just avoid getting you in too much trouble, Brad. You can join in if you want, but just full disclosure, Brad picked the title, and then I was the one that went nuts with the idea that we were going to talk about the Socialist Solution advocated by Mitch McConnell. That was me. Did I go too far?
I don't think so. I've always joked about Mitch. He loves to say I'm killing their socialism, and I get a chuckle out of it every time, as much as I did the first time I heard it. Watching him parade around like he led the way on that $2 trillion donor slush fund called a stimulus package that he brought forward was laughable and painful at the same time, from a libertarian standpoint.
Right. And it's just like the bank bailouts, and we've heard for a decade that y'all don't believe in socialism. You believe in socialism when it's for the big companies, when it's for the big banks.
Well, that's one of my things I always say about Mitch, when it suits him.
Right. Right.
I remember watching the 2014 KET debates with Mitch and Allison Lundgren Grimes, and at that time he was the minority leader, and he presented it as the urgency of him becoming majority leader and getting reelected was because we had a national debt at $14 trillion.
26, boys and girls.
Yeah, I'd say we'll be close to 30 by the time those KET debates happen this time.
About right.
We'll be, yeah, more than likely. I mean, one more, yeah.
Sure would be nice to. I'm bad at that. Sure would be nice to have a third person on that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And what he does is he always wins by default.
Right.
You know, it's all, well, maybe I am, but would you rather vote for the Democrat? I mean, that's the default position. And people are like, well, it's a good point. He's been in there for so many years and knows how things work up there. And I tell them that's the problem. He helped create, to a large extent, how things are in that swamp. And I mean, I've heard him called many times the head of the DC snake. And I've said, you know, the interesting thing with Mitch is we have a voting record on him.
Right.
You can pull it up, you can look. And in this day of technological advancement, I wouldn't even think he'd be running for re-election. If I had his voting record, I would probably just bow out.
Right.
But Mitch depends on the now moment. His, you know, his philosophy is get to November, throw out a little pork. I always say he supposedly throws all this pork, or gives us all this pork, but barely throws us a bag of pork rinds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's always overstated what he does for the state. And we don't want that anyways as libertarians. We don't want all that pork. All it's doing is holding back innovation. It's holding back what Kentucky could be.
Right.
And after all these years, I mean, pull up and see where we rank in education. Pull up and see where we rank economically. This state has unbelievable potential.
It does.
That I feel is being squandered. I mean, is that really what we want to be known as? That we're a state that has to beg for crumbs from the blue states?
Exactly.
You know, and that was exposed when Mitch talked about, you know, just let the states file bankruptcy. That was a big mistake, because then it got pointed out, well, hey, a lot of the red states like Kentucky are actually taking their bailouts from the blue states.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I heard them quickly. A lot of right-wing Republicans were saying, oh, let the states go bankrupt. Well, then they were in for a big surprise when they saw which states were ones that depended on the federal funds.
Right. I mean, it is some of the, well, it's specifically New York and New Jersey that got hit really hard with this pandemic.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sort of. But then you look at the unemployment in New York versus the unemployment of Kentucky. Are you sure you know who got hit hard? We're at like 40% unemployment, boys and girls.
Yeah, well, locking everybody in the house. I mean, and we've been shown in some circles, Andy Beshear has been shown as a model of how to do it. And, you know, a lot of us are not in agreement with that assessment.
Right.
It's like I tell people about climate change. I've studied climate change for 20 years, and I still don't have a great handle on it. I mean, the data, the science, I mean, I'm sure you know. I mean, you can't really put your finger on exactly on concrete evidence of much with it. And you definitely can't say it's 100% man-made. And it's hard to say that even if we agree that it exists and it is man-made, I mean, how much can we do to reverse it? How much can we do to slow it down? Well, I'm not saying we set it to the side, but these people that speak in such absolutes, like they know exactly what's going on. Right. They must be a heck of a lot smarter than I am, because I live it every day with regenerative farming. I study it on the regular, and I don't have a handle of exactly what to do.
It's what to do that is tricky. I mean, you're right. What percent of it's man-made? I mean, an expert that says they know exactly what percent of it's man-made, yeah, they don't. Sorry, experts. But that doesn't mean we don't listen to the experts, and we really do have. Absolutely. We really do have a lot of people who've put a lot of hard work in there. And my big thing with climate change is I would like to lower how much government butts in, so that we can we can help the scientists be more honest. We need more signal per noise. You know, I even see this with Falchi during the pandemic. Is Falchi will give I mean, he always leans toward the health side. But you know, he'll give a moderately middle of the road interview You know, he'll say things like, you know, yes, opening up too early could cause a spike. We need to be careful. And then a little later in the interview, he'll remind people he's just presenting the medical side of this. That's his area of expertise. This decision's made by other people. And all of a sudden you get people who just take that one little nugget and they act like that's the whole discussion. It's just not. And the same's true for climate change.
Absolutely.
But personally, I do believe it's anthropogenic carbon we're dealing with. Where I largely part with the environmentalist is their solutions. I think a lot of their solutions are not so good. I think we need to listen to a lot more people like you, Brad, and learn more about how to farm smarter. That's what we need to do.
I always tell people there's not any downside to regenerative agriculture. That's the beauty of it. If climate change is real, then it's going to help combat it. If it's not, then it's what we need to be doing anyways, because we don't need to be exporting the topsoil off into the streams and out into the ocean. And we need to spray as little amount of chemicals as we can to get the desired result. So there's really no downside to this. But what it does require is some thinking and some studying. It's not a one size fits all. There's a lot of different practices, and these practices work. But you have to cater it to your specific market and your specific farm.
Right.
And that goes back once again to central planning. There we are again. It seems like a lot of roads lead back to this. On a lot of things, there's not a one size fits all for regenerative ag in, say, California versus regenerative ag in, say, Kentucky.
Right.
But I think so much of your innovation comes from the bottom up. And that's why, you know, regardless of what the industry is. And one of the things that's always laughable to me is you hear a common lie floating around out there that these big companies that are established, they hate regulations. That's a lie. They love them. They love them because the little guy can't have a whole team dedicated to regulations.
Paper shuffling,
they complain, oh, did you see they threw this new regulation? Well, it's just another thing another tactic of cronyism that's hidden in plain sight there that keeps the fat companies on top, and that stymies innovation.
Yep. I've worked for small companies. I've worked for big companies. Yeah, I have a pretty good handle on who gets shafted by regulation. There's no doubt about that. Hey, we gotta leave the regenerative farming thing, but just that one thing you said about fertilizing, I wish I'd cut in earlier, but go back about 3 minutes, re-listen to what Brad said sometime, and then look up at what's destroying the barrier reef. People love to blame that on climate change. It's what Brad was talking about right there. Yeah.
And I have actually seen some staunch climate denying right-wing Republicans go out and fishing trips and find out about what's going on in the ocean and come back and say, now, I saw it with my own two eyes. Something's going on here. And instead of just browbeating people, that's the stuff you need to do. Show them what you're talking about with the barrier reef. Show them these dead spots in the ocean.
Right.
And they can understand it. They just feel like they're under attack from like the Greta Thunberg movement. So the default position is for them to attack and deny. I mean, these aren't dumb people. It sets off their fight or flight. They see someone trying to end capitalism, take them out of their job, usher in socialism, and it sets them into a frenzy.
Right. No, I told everybody at the beginning of the show that we were about ideas, and look where we automatically slip. So yeah, I said if you hate Mitch, go click here and donate. That's not what we're about. I mean, what we really need to do is we need to stop focusing on hating the greater evil.
Absolutely.
We need to calm down. You can't have good conversations mad. You know, you see people out here, both sides, always trying to make their side angry. You don't learn while you're angry. You just don't. You gotta
I would say one of the things that I say to Democrats or Republicans, and we'll say in this case, they assume Amy McGrath's going to be the nominee. So most of them talk about Amy McGrath and Mitch. I say that's what I ask from you is I require a vision and ideas from them. That's all I want. You listen to my vision, my ideas. You listen to their vision and their ideas, and then make your decision. That's all I ask. And if it's not me, then I respect that. Don't get caught up in the ads. You know, and that's, I mean, it's nothing more than a distraction. We all know this, that they raise money from their special interest groups. They raise money from their donors. They run ads attacking the other guy. And meanwhile, no one's really talking about solutions.
Yeah. Selling hate, selling anger.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're not selling solutions, hate and anger.
Yeah, that's it. And
let's sell some solutions, Brad.
Yeah, well, and I always say, well, that's what I've been trying to tell you. I always say they are opposite sides of the same fiscally irresponsible coin.
They are.
I think that describes them perfectly. But yeah, we're talking about the pandemic. The nimbleness is the key. Think about how quickly the free market would have responded, knowing that the data was there, that it would eventually, that COVID-19 would eventually reach America. We would have been prepared and ready. Right. Had that been the case. The free market would have waited, and they would have taken everything into consideration, and you wouldn't have shortages. But what the government wants, in my opinion, they enjoy the shortage. They enjoy them being in control of the narrative. And then you have to depend upon them to get what you need. And in the world that you and I want, you don't have to depend on them at all.
No.
They're here just as they should just be in the fade away into the wallpaper.
Yep.
Is what they should be. And they should be protecting your basic rights from being infringed upon. And then let the ideas flow from the people, from the individual.
You know, I had we had a couple of cold snaps this year, a little late. Got my tomato plants, and went back to the guy that sold me the plants. He knew why I was there. It was just a couple of miles up the road from my farm. And he goes, the cold got us. I got you some more plants. Then he wouldn't let me pay him. I told him, I'm like, it's not your fault it got cold. He goes, well, no, we all got to work together with this. And I mean, that's what we say. We got to work together with this while you know, the people who want to be in control, they want to say, you got to do what we say. Your life depends on it. You know? And Trump's trying to get us to hate China. And it's not that I'm a fan of China, but
it's dangerous territory.
It is dangerous territory. And what makes me really angry, you can watch my video, Hate China with a question mark, is when you look at the mistakes China made, the mistakes they made were fundamentally, they needed to feel like they were in control. They needed to project that they were in control. And because of that, they didn't give their people the information they needed to respond right. What set us up to not be able to respond to this? Why didn't we have testing in place? Why didn't we have supplies in place? We were told it was under control and we didn't need to respond to this. It's not in me to hate China without hating us. I'm sorry, boys and girls. We made the same fundamental error for the same fundamental reasons.
The money that's spent on the military-industrial complex. If we're ill-equipped to have to know what's going on when something like this breaks loose, I heard something the other day talking about like tanks in the Pentagon. The Pentagon telling some of these congressmen, hey, I think it was during Justin Amash's interview with Bill Maher, which is interesting, talking about the Pentagon saying we don't need any more tanks, but we're going to build them anyways.
Of course,
because of these defense contracts.
Well, that's one of Mitch's counterparts playing the same game Mitch does. I don't think we build it. We might build something for the tanks in Kentucky, but you know, somebody somewhere wants that pork. And
the dangers of unchecked government spending and unchecked government growth is you then start grandfathering in people whose jobs depend upon socialism. Let's call it what it is. You got socialism right, socialism left. It's the same, once again, opposite sides of the same fiscally irresponsible coin.
Yep.
You take personal accountability out of it. You do what I think is the most morally bankrupt thing in the human experience, and that is let a government pick winners and losers through cronyism.
Absolutely.
And then both sides get going at each other about how the other one, oh, you got to vote for us this time, or the world's going to end. I love that meme about libertarians. We love libertarians, but we can't vote for them this time because this election's too important.
Right.
Every person, every election that's ever been.
Let's kill us some straw man arguments, man. We needed the government to give us testing.
Okay.
Kill the straw man argument. We needed the government to give us testing.
No, we absolutely didn't need them. I mean, going back to what I said earlier, deregulate, deregulate, deregulate. It's the answer to most every question.
Right.
And the funny thing is, if you take someone that doesn't pay a lot of attention to politics, and they say, "Oh, Brad, but we have to have government," I walk them through and I say, I agree with that. We have to have a very limited government that protects your fundamental rights as an individual. But then I'll say
the law.
Yeah. There you go.
It describes the government you need on about page 3. It might cover into page 4. That's about it.
Right. But then I tell them, think about anything that you have to do that requires government oversight. Let's just start out with the license branch, and you can just see like a guttural reaction from the license branch, and they start to see the inefficiency of government, and that's how I walk them along. People that aren't paying attention every day, and I think we need to do more of that. There's a lot of people that I'm sure that are watching this that know a lot about politics in general, but we have to be able to articulate to the layman, the guy that's going out there and working his butt off every day and coming home and sitting down on the couch and tired, and just wants to hear about, tell me how this is going to help me. Tell me how this is going to affect my everyday life. Those are the people that we need to get to the polls. And those are the people that when they want to do something, I think about, I've got a friend that he works for the state, a good friend of mine, and he grinds stumps on the side, like a stump grinding business. They just feed him to death, there's a license and insurance, all the things that are required of him. By the time he's done, he doesn't have much left in his back pocket.
There's a stump grinding license?
Yeah, there's some type of local license he was telling me about with it. I'm sure it's some type of contracting license. It probably, the stump grinding falls under that umbrella. But once again, what it does is it allows these companies that are more established, that have gotten the government contracts, to stay in there and fend off their competition.
Right.
Once again, it goes back to every time there's regulation, ask why. What's it doing? What's it providing? Just like tax dollars, I tell people, ask yourself, what value is being provided by this taxation? At bare minimum, one of the common sayings of libertarians, taxation is theft. Well, taxation's a reality we're in right now. But it's not going anywhere tomorrow. We can get all edgelord about it, but let's start with, if it's going to be there, how about it provides some real value?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. So that's when you talk about solutions, and that lends us to transparency. If you think about it, if we argue about taxation, there are certain things that, if done correctly, if people's money were piled in, let's say we get together and buy something in bulk, Rob, and we get a better deal on it because of that.
Sure.
Think about with healthcare. Think about basic things in healthcare. One of the things I like to say is fish oil. Good for you. A lot of studies on it. Why not take that and say, we're going to provide some value here. We're going to show you exactly where we're spending the money. We're going to make this efficient, and we're going to give people some preventative medicine. Well, who wants preventative? Do you think they want preventative medicine when their donors?
Not the people who are paying Mitch. Mitch.
Yeah. Do you think? And I ask myself, I tell people to ask themselves, do you think that the guy that you're voting for, the man or woman you're voting for office, if you were sick and you weren't going to make it, and let's say you have cancer, and I know one of our friends had a father that had this, and you watch them, and all they want is some comfort on their way out.
Mm-hmm.
and you're the guy that stands in between them and smoking some marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is real. This isn't, just political fire. This is real stuff. I mean, you have to be able to empathize and think, if that were me, if that were my wife, if that were my child laying there on the way out, that they could be arrested for smoking a joint.
Hint, hint for our down ballot buddies running for Frankfurt here.
Mm-hmm.
Is there was a bill for legal marijuana, and it didn't quite make it into the schedule for this year. Meanwhile, they changed the law in Kentucky so that you can deliver alcohol to the door. Now, I drink alcohol. Absolutely. I drink bourbon. I think you should be able to do that. I'm fine with that. But really, that was priority over allowing people.
We all know why.
And just to be clear, I've never even tried marijuana. It's not about me.
I mean, it's not me either. But it's not about that. And I get that response from people. Well, I don't care if marijuana is illegal. I don't smoke it. Well, what about when they come for the thing that you do like?
Right.
And what business is it of theirs to begin with? That's the fundamental question we've got here. I'll tell you why they care about it. Why did they make it illegal? That takes us right to one of the biggest pieces of garbage government implementation there is, the failed war on drugs.
Absolutely.
I mean, I put in a post one day, when they put war on, it's destined for failure.
You're right.
And I think it's by design. Drugs are worth a lot more on the black market than they are, when they're illegal, than they are if it was legal. If some guy can raise a couple of marijuana plants in the backyard, nobody's getting rich off that.
I'm bad with citing names for quotes. I think it was Marcus Aurelius who said, the secret to war is infinite money, something like that. And I mean, that's when they say war on, what they're doing is they're giving you a heads up. The amount of money they want from you is infinite. That's what they're saying.
Marcus Aurelius also knew the power of distracting the mob.
Mm-hmm. Bread and circuses.
Yeah, the Colosseum is still something that everyone remembers.
Absolutely.
And we have our own forms of Coliseum now.
Sure.
Sports. I mean,
$1,200, $1,200.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about sports, the distractions. They need something to distract the mob, and I love sports, but I also know that when you're sitting there glued to the TV, watching, a team, in team sports as part of politics, red versus blue. But what's interesting is this pandemic has possibly given libertarians here, if we'll run with it, an angle. I read an article saying everyone becomes libertarian in a pandemic, because you do start paying attention to who you're around, paying attention to where, it's just like your overall attention is exacerbated under this current situation. But I want to rewind back a little bit here to what you were talking about with bourbon.
Yeah.
And I remember, a preacher that I had growing up always said something that stuck with me is, what we tolerate today, we accept tomorrow. And it stuck with me I was a kid when I heard it the first time. And I think about that with this situation with Andy Beshear here in the state, that he gets on every hour or every day for an hour, and talks about where we're at and where we need to be, and we're all in this together. And I want you to think about this, that Walmart and Kroger still open. And from what I've seen from COVID-19, its strength is, if you're packed in tight, that's where it transmits. Its weakness is, why we're supposed to be social distancing and whatnot, is because, or at least this is the narrative that they're feeding us, is because it has problems bouncing from person to person if you're not in tight quarters. Well, what better way to spread the disease and tell everybody the sky's falling and the only place that's open is Walmart?
Right. And I see that a lot.
Small businesses. So let's think about this. Think about income. Okay, so some people would have probably said, okay, if you're in a higher income bracket and there were smaller stores open that it costs more to go there, some of those people would have went to the people that have the money to spend. And then, so people of less income are going to flock to the place. They're living from paycheck to paycheck anyways. So they have to get the most bang for their buck. So they're going to Walmart. So there you hoard all the people of less means into Walmart. And that's perfectly fine. But if you have a mom and pop shop, you have to close.
Right.
I mean, do you think that, I mean, it would be interesting if we could get the Ouija boards out and summon our founding fathers. It's like, what do we possibly have here as a governor? And don't get me wrong, I know back then something like this kind of pandemic was something that was unforeseen. You know, we didn't travel across the world, we didn't fly everywhere.
Well, they had pandemics, Brad.
Well, they did. That's a good point. But what I'm saying is how we are with technology now. You can be in China one day, back here in the States the next. It wasn't like that as far as
it spreads faster. Absolutely.
Spreading quickly. Yeah, spreading fast. Yeah, they didn't have that to deal with, but still, like you're saying, the basic foundation's there. I mean, pandemics existed in that time, but it would be interesting if you could bring Thomas Jefferson out here and say, we've got a governor here that every day he gets on TV for an hour and tells you, you know, what you can and can't do and where you can and can't go over. And I'm not setting it to the side how horrible COVID-19 is, but statistically, if we just laid the facts out that here's the mortality rate and here's what's going on, would they or would they not think we're being run by a tyrannical government?
Right, absolutely. Well, the other problem is, if Sweden's right, and people like to debate if Sweden's right, but then they're just like, oh, they're risking people's lives. But what they fail to understand is so are we.
Absolutely.
If Sweden's right and we're wrong, then we're going, because they're doing a decent job of locking up their high-risk people for a short period of time. You know, we can't lock up our high-risk people for 2 flipping years. It isn't going to work.
Yeah.
We are failing to burn through to make us as a population more immune, herd immunity, if you will.
Yeah.
And
back to regenerative agriculture.
Right. We very well could be killing more at-risk people explicitly by the way we're locking down. It's not just money versus lives.
That's right.
We need to be honest about the data. We need to be open-minded. We need to not.
But do you trust the government to be honest about the data? That's the question. I mean, how can we be honest about the data? One of the things that has really changed and hurt us in this country is used to what you'd want on your tombstone if you ran for office is you would want to be a statesman. I would want it to say on my tombstone, this was Brad Barron. He loved liberty. He loved Kentucky. And that's why he ran for office. Because like you and I talked about last night, we're not doing this for the money. That's for sure.
No.
You know, and like we talked about, you should only want someone in office that doesn't really want to go to DC. If they crave being in that mess, you don't want them there.
Right.
And I tell people, just like with the pandemic or just like with global warming, burying your head in the sand isn't the right answer, but also bankrupting the world and possibly starving people to death isn't the answer either.
Yeah, keeping your head out of sand means paying attention to all the data. But you mentioned trusting the government. Like, my big pet peeve about the mask, I'm actually kind of a pro wear the mask if you can kind of person. But what really angers me about the mask is they pivoted from don't wear the mask to, oh, you need to wear a mask. And I miss the evidence or the science or the, oh, sorry, we had the paper upside down and read it wrong. There's no explanation, no explanation at all. It reminds me of parents who say, because. Why? Because.
Yeah, because I said so.
Right. We have a government who we've entitled, they think they're entitled to say because we said so. That's
very interesting, Rob, that you bring that up. My best high school teacher was a libertarian. That's where I first heard of libertarianism. And he won the teacher of the year in the state that I was in about 6 or 7 years after I graduated. And he always said that it's nothing more than laziness for a parent to tell their child because I said so, and it's equal to the government.
That's right.
They don't get to tell you because I said so.
Right.
But they sure think they can.
Right.
And it goes back to the problem here. one of the biggest problems is them having a monopoly on force and coercion. It doesn't mean we're anti-police.
No.
By saying that, we just want just laws, like we always say, no victim, no crime.
No, exactly.
But we also don't. I went and picked up some Mexican carryout the other day, and Puerto Vallarta here in Bowling Green. Well, I'm sitting there with my son, my oldest son, Luke, and he said, "Dad, there's a police officer sitting over there." There was a bush in between where I was parked, and he wheeled in, parked in a handicap zone. But anyways, so I'm sitting there, and we had our masks with us, and we hadn't been out and about much. And so I'm like, should we have it on here? The guy's bringing the food out. Well, the officer sitting over there in the car, he gets out and goes in the restaurant without a mask on. And, my son's asking, what are we supposed to do here? Here's this officer. And oftentimes the observation from young children can give you a real knowing of what's truly going on. They're hearing this on the television, but they're like, so Dad, does he not have to adhere to these same rules? Does COVID-19 not affect you if you become an officer or a governor?
You can't spread it if you're the officer of the law. I think.
If you're an officer of the law, or if you're Andy Beshear, you can back in there on the stage. Doesn't affect you. You can get your hair cut. You can do all these things. So I always say libertarians are blessed with doses of healthy skepticism of authority.
Absolutely.
We're blessed with that. And most of us are data driven and logic driven. We're not fear driven.
Right.
And that's something that I've seen a lot of from the R's and the D's, is the authoritarian R and D. They both kind of fell in with these lockdowns, surprisingly. Right. I see some of the people are starting to get restless now. So, you're starting to see a little bit more civil disobedience and complaining going on. But there for a while, right. I was surprised how many of them followed Andy Beshear without much question.
Well, I'll admit, even I in March, when we were looking at 34% increase per day, but then and we didn't have data, but data was coming in really quick, and like we knew it took about 10 to 14 days before you got new information based on your changes. And, it was like change. It's like, you can't be basing this off of anything. You're just stabbing in the flipping dark. You're like a panicked monkey.
That's right. And they won't let even if there's no conspiracy behind this, even if it's just simply a pandemic that they got caught ill-equipped for with their pants down, might be the case. Still, the question you have to ask yourself from a rudimentary standpoint is, how much do I trust the government to handle this correctly? Really, at the end of the day, that's what you have to ask yourself. Do I trust them to make the right decisions, or do I believe in the collective right of the individual, that a collective of individuals will bring a remedy that is sustainable? That's a word we need to beat to death here with what's going on now, is sustainable.
Right. Sustainable economy, sustainable agriculture. We have to live for more than just today. Otherwise, what are we doing?
That's right. Selling out our kids and grandchildren. I remember a time that the national debt was Ross Perot, ran upon talking about this. Now, it's a what have you done for me lately? You print and be damned. And, the Federal Reserve up there, just print a little more, and we've been away from Mitch for a little while here. Let's go back to him. He's fiscally conservative when he's running, or when there's a Democrat as president.
Right.
Then he's fiscally conservative. And one of the dangers we're into right now, and I'm hoping that this is about to shift gears, and I can feel it shifting some, is people saying, we're in on this now. We're seeing the divide and conquer strategy that's used by these parties to basically do the same thing. By convincing the other that, if a liberal gets elected, it's just over with. When I can take their voting, just like, and you saw me fired up about it, I always say the most unconstitutional, anti-liberty piece of garbage legislation we've ever seen, named the Patriot Act. voting for what I call government peeping Tom policies. Yeah,
that's what it
what's
is.
funny is I had the Republicans in a quandary the other day because Rand voted for that amendment to stop the spying without a warrant, the surveillance without a warrant. Mitch voted against it. So when I tell them, I put on there, Mitch voted that he wants you to be able to be spied on. And they're like, oh, that's fake news. Immediately, the knee jerks, that's fake news. There's got to be more to it than this. I'm like, here is the vote. Now, Rand voted yay, Mitch voted nay. You aren't talking your way out of this.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and several were like, yeah, now that we've looked it up, that is true. And
yeah, I'm not the Rand fan I was like 4 or 5 years ago, but kudos to Mr. Paul when he does things like that. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, but I mean, when he's right, he's right.
He's right.
But I'll tell you something that's interesting is I saw a lot of constitutional conservatives really make me proud. And they posted the vote online. This wasn't libertarians. This wasn't liberals. These were true constitutional conservatives.
Right.
And they put, hey, look, we just had we had more Republicans vote for surveillance of innocent citizens than Democrats. And I tell them, big Second Amendment guys, and I am myself, and I tell them all the time, you shred the Fourth, and the second's on the way.
Absolutely.
I mean, talk about opening the door to red flag laws. There you have it.
Is Wesley Morgan still in the race?
Well, he is. And he knows this. I mean, you shred that Fourth Amendment, and it just opens up a whole Pandora's box of things that can go wrong. And one of the things that I've always said that I feel that the right likes to keep people distracted on is sit there and say over and over again, we're pro-Second Amendment, we're pro-Second Amendment, while they backdoor. And I'm not talking about the supporters. I'm not talking about Republicans. I'm talking about they're being duped by people like McConnell.
Right.
And if you think about how McConnell does business, slipping things in the back doorway and the loopholes and playing that angle has always been his angle. I tell people he's the man behind the curtain on The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
Trump's out here in your face. Mitch doesn't want to be in your face. He wants to be behind the scenes making his deals, and he doesn't care if he ever sees the press.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what I feel he's doing with the Fourth. And I tell people, just because he says they're a conservative judge, we still need to look at their voting records.
Yep. Man,
and several of them they are. Go ahead.
We're almost 50 minutes in.
Really? Wow, it doesn't seem like that. But anyway, for solutions in the past, and they've been laced throughout this conversation.
They have.
Is deregulate these things. Let the free market decide.
Right.
And keep socialism out of this thing.
Absolutely.
The more we do not want to be dependent upon the government to decide to plan our comings and goings, so to speak, right. Just to put it in layman's terms. And we're literally out that now. And good leadership. It reminds me of a Sunday school teacher I had. We were a wild bunch in there as kids. And this group I was in, no one wanted to volunteer to teach us in Sunday school. But we had one guy that could control us. And it was because we respected him and we liked him and we didn't want to disappoint him.
Right.
He was not the forceful one that tried to use force everywhere. He wanted to lead by showing you things and he wanted to make you, he made you want to be better. That's the leadership we need in this country. It's fine in a pandemic. If I were in office, I would come out and say, like you're saying, be honest with the data, come out and say, here's what we need to be doing, people. If you're going out and doing these things, you're going to put us all in danger. You're going to put yourself in danger. So don't do it. I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to send the police over, but I'm telling you from a very honest place and standpoint here, you're playing with fire if you do these things.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think you'd be surprised how many people fall in line better when that type of leadership is presented. It's almost like our human nature is when somebody tells us you're not going to do something, by gosh, we're going to do it.
We're going to do it.
Yes. And you can see I wonder how many people, when this first hit locally here in Bowling Green where I'm at, I wonder how many total people were in and out of Walmart in 3 days' time. And one more thing on these masks that you were talking about. You've seen that the slaughterhouses are ones where this pandemic has run roughshod.
Absolutely.
And if you think about it, I know they're packed in there and there's some unsanitary things at times, but they always wear masks.
Yep.
You know, it's something to think about. If you're packed in somewhere with a mask on, I don't know how this thing incubates, but I know that, I mean, I don't think that's tinfoil hat stuff to say, hey, I'm looking at where these people are. This is where it's caught on like wildfire. And what do they all have in common? They're packed in like sardines with masks on.
Well, Brad has a lot to say, and I see there's a lot of people who are interested. I just, you know, we go much past 50 minutes and people look at the video and go, oh, 50 minutes, there's no way I'm going to do that. So we'll have another one instead. We'll do more of these, Brad. I promise. But, you know, back to your teacher example, you know, people behaved well because he trusted them. That's how that worked, you know, and that's what we're looking for is we don't want you to, we want you to have faith in you. Because we have faith in you. We want you to vote for people who empower you to do the right thing.
Absolutely.
That's what we're after. Because we honestly have faith in you.
And, you know, there was a lot of great things going on right before this happened. Look at the constitutional groups and the Second Amendment groups that we had here in Kentucky. I mean, they were organized and they were fighting the good fight. And, you know, this has shut down a lot of it because, you know, you can't go to a rally when you're on house arrest. Basically, and like I said, I don't want to say that is taken away from. I don't want to go through this with people thinking I'm setting the dangers of COVID-19 to the side. That's not it. It's the tactics that have been implemented. I tell people it's like a boa constrictor, tightening it up. And anytime the government starts tightening their reins more than they already have, which to begin with is more than they should have, you know, I'm going to start to get my hackles up.
Well, and if you cover your eyes and maintain your point and refuse to look at any new data, any new arguments, any new ideas, you're the one putting people at risk. You know, you got to keep your mind open to navigate. I mean, this is the novel coronavirus. It's the new coronavirus. You know, new being the key word. You have to respond to it as something new. You have to keep learning and adapting.
But there's nothing wrong with healthy skepticism. We all need, especially I say, one of the sayings, if I remember correctly, that I said was, when fear and force show up, put your liberty guard up. You know, when I start seeing fear mongering coupled with force, I start saying, okay, I need to pay more attention to this than anything else. When those two are together, look at what happened with 9/11. I mean, tragic event, horrible event, but it ushered in the Patriot Act. What act is COVID-19 going to usher in?
I don't know, but I'm going to vote against it.
Something else I want to say before I go is I'm doing this from a friend of mine's house. You know this, and that's why I don't have the best visual quality here. I'm just in his room, his spare bedroom with a desk here, but I wanted to do this. I have it set up with lighting, just like your place at my farm, but we've been having problems the last 2 weeks with the Wi-Fi, and I didn't want to risk, you know, going in and out. So you get a grainier version of the Barron here than you will see hopefully at our next get together.
Well, let's get the Barron on the stage. I don't think he'll be grainy there. So go get us to $100,000. I'm convinced it'll cause Mitch at least $1 million of trouble.
Well, I've already caused him more than $1 million of trouble. Yeah, this is well, and it's just such a golden opportunity for us, for all of us libertarians, and not just libertarians, for common sense people on all political persuasion. I think it's been so long, and I'm not the only one that can do it. There's a lot of people. I wish more people that are just regular people out here in the matrix, so to speak, would run for office and show people. You know, that you don't have to be ran through the machine of these parties to be successful, that you can come in here with good common sense legislation and turn this thing around and get back on a sustainable course.
Please
because
primary me and please primary me in 2022. 2 years in DC might be enough for me.
Yeah. Well, I don't plan on being there with you, so I don't plan on primary. Yeah. You can primary me in 6 years. As a matter of fact, maybe I'll just let you have it.
You made your bed. You lied.
Yeah, I know. My term, if elected, is for 6. You only signed on for 2.
Exactly. All right, folks. Let us know questions you have for Brad. What you think we should try to talk about next time. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the topics, but there's so much to say. It really
is. Well, and I'm good at getting I won't say exactly off topic, but I grab 3 or 4 other topics and try to tie them into the topic at hand. But really, that's the way it is. When you ask about a solution, right. I mean, I could spend 3 hours here just talking about one specific solution and the steps necessary to get there. But none of us have that kind of attention span these days. So like you said, it goes over an hour and people are like, what in the world? What is this, a feature-length movie?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
what I plan on doing is doing some short, like 3-minute videos that are just teaser videos, and then doing some like 20, like a series of 3 or 4 20-minute videos behind that. Get the teaser video, and if you want to dig deeper, then we'll go farther down the rabbit hole.
I like that plan. All right, folks, let us know if you have questions, things you want us to cover next time. Tomorrow night, I have Frank Harris on. That's likely to be fun as well. Frank's a really smart, eclectic guy also. I can't wait to talk to you then.
He also likes Tulsi Gabbard, so if you can get her on as well. Yeah.
Be sure to donate. Be sure to spread this far and wide. We want to get Brad on the stage, and we want to hear more ideas, not just a bunch of people saying hate the other side.
Absolutely.
I will see you all later. Have a great evening. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.